Hey there, Nick here. In this video, we're going to go over how to get bidirectional clipboard sharing to work between Windows and WSL2 using WSLg. We're also going to go over switching away from VcXsrv to WSLg to facilitate that clipboard sharing. Now, if you're not familiar with VcXsrv, that's fine. It's a Windows X server. We're not going to spend a whole lot of time here. In fact, we're going to go over the opposite, basically replacing this with WSLg. But, this is something that I've been using since about 2017 when I first got clipboard sharing to work between Windows and WSL way before WSL2 and even WSLg were available. So yeah, we're going to go into some of the gory details there. But, let's just focus now on just making sure that you have WSLg available. So you could just run, this command here, which is going to get your version of WSL. And the takeaway here is you want to look for this line here. Now, if the version numbers that you have are a little bit higher, that should be good to go here if you're watching this video in the future. Chances are this will work for you out of the box here if you've installed a WSL2 distro from Microsoft's App Store. It's also worth pointing out that you do need a version of Windows 10 or 11, and Windows 10, I believe the cutoff sometime was mid 2022. So as long as you're running a reasonably modern version of Windows 10, then you should be good to go. Now, there is one bit of configuration that you want to check just to make sure that WSLg is available here. I have a commit here where I did swap away from VcXsrv to WSLg. And you'll just want to make sure in your .wsl config file in your Windows home directory, and by the way, if you don't have that file, then you're good to go. There's nothing to look at. But yeah, if you do explicitly have GUI applications set to false, that is going to disable WSLg, which is what I did have before. So yeah, you'll want to either remove this line from your config file or explicitly set it to true. So the default value is true. That's why you can remove the line and it's good to go. But if you do need to make this modification, then you will need to restart WSL. So you can always just open up, PowerShell there, do a WSL -- shutdown, and then just open up a new terminal and you are good to go. Now, you might be wondering though, it's like, well, if VcXsrv works so great, like why even bother switching to WSLg? And honestly, it just comes down to simplifying my life. So VcXsrv, it is an open source tool, but it did require installing it specifically on Windows, and then you had to configure it. And then you had to also configure it to start a specific config file on Windows Startup. Because, when you boot up Windows, you don't want to have to tinker with all this stuff. You just want things to just work. And then also beyond just configuring all of that, you also had to go into your WSL2 distro and then export this display value here in your shell's RC file here. That was all the old code that was all set up here, but none of this really is necessary with WSLg. So I think that is a pretty big win here too. There's also this one config file that I had. The font size is pretty big on video. This was in the startup here, and I've actually done videos about VcXsrv. Again, don't want to spend a whole lot of time here, but yeah, you can basically just remove all of that stuff, and then you are good to go here to get things working with WSLg. Now, with that said, let's talk a little bit about bidirectional clipboard sharing and also demonstrate that it actually works. So if you're using something like the Microsoft Terminal, you can hit Control-Shift-C and Control-Shift-V to copy-paste text. That's not really bidirectional sharing because that's just using the Microsoft Terminal hotkeys to copy-paste text using your Windows clipboard. So with that said, you will need some type of native Linux application running inside of WSL. I'm going to open up NeoVim here. If you have Vim, that's fine. If you're using Nano or something else, that's also fine. Whatever application that you have, it doesn't necessarily even need to be a text editor. But let's demonstrate that we actually can copy paste text directly. So in this case, I am going to just type in something like hello world. This is cool from Linux, let's say, and I'm going to hit YY, which is going to copy this line to the Linux clipboard running in WSL. And by the way, I will mention this, quick aside, if you are using Vim or NeoVim, you will need to set your clipboard to unnamed plus, which, this would be this option here. If you're using something like LazyVim, then it is, because I didn't have to explicitly configure this one. But yeah, in my Vim setup here, you will need to set that. That's not related to WSL or Windows or clipboard sharing. That's more specific to just getting Vim or NeoVim to write and read from your system's clipboard. But yeah, we just copy this to the clipboard, right? And now I'm going to go and open up Notepad here and Control-V just to paste it in. And you can see that demonstrates copying from Linux into Windows using clipboard sharing bidirectional. Nice. Let's do it the other way around, like hello world. Nice, from Windows. Okay, cool. So I'm going to Control-C this one and then paste it right into Vim here. I'm just going to hit P to paste. And nice, and it's working. So we confirm now that bidirectional clipboard sharing is working, or is it? Because there is a subtle difference between VcXsrv and WSLg, which might be a bug in WSLg. So check it out. If you actually have a couple of lines here and you copy that from Windows and you try to paste that into here. Again, I hit P. Notice that there are Windows line endings at the end of these two lines with line breaks. So that ~M there is like a Windows line ending, right? It's like a CRLF, like carriage return line feed, instead of an LF, which would be, like a Unix line ending. Now, what's interesting though is like, if you just copy this and paste it into Notepad, then yeah, Notepad is already handling that. It's good to go. It can do that. And you might be thinking now though, like, well, maybe you should go back to VcXsrv or something, because it didn't have that problem, by the way, for 8 years. There is an out here, which is pretty good, I guess. I mean, it's something we need to do for now, but if you go back and now copy everything from Notepad, and we go back into here, and we just do Control-Shift-V, then notice that those line endings aren't there. So again, I'm guessing the Microsoft terminal probably does something to automatically translate those CRLFs into LF. And that's something that VcXsrv just did for you. You could have just used your native like Linux copy pasting with like, P or whatever in Vim. But yeah, I think this might be a bug. So what I ended up doing was opening up a bug report here. I'll leave links to all this stuff in the descriptions there. It has a reproducible example here. I don't know if it's reproducible for everybody, but yeah, it's a problem on my system here. Didn't get looked at yet, but whatever. Hopefully someone picks it up, takes a look, because yeah, it would be nice just to be able to paste things natively to get things to work. And by the way, this is a real quick aside here, but like this is not just for clipboard sharing, right? When you have an X server running like this, you can actually run graphical applications too. So for example, if I quit this, nope, don't want to save it. If I just run something like Xcalc, then that is going to open up a calculator here. This window is actually spawned from Linux, and it's like floating around in Windows. I can drag it. I only record a segment on my screen here, but yeah, it's all good to go here. You can cancel this out. And if you wanted to play around with that one, you can, I think it was Xorg Calc. Let me verify that just to make sure. Oh, maybe it's Xorg Xcalc. Yeah, there we go. So it was that one. I don't want to install everything else, but yeah, that was the package there. If you're using something like Arch Linux, that's a neat little benefit of being able to run some graphical apps. And with WSLg, there's also GPU support there, which is pretty cool. But with that said, yeah, that's everything really you need to get going for bidirectional clipboard sharing between Windows and WSL. So with that said, if you have any questions, let me know in the comments below. I'll do my best to answer all of them. If you like the video, please give a thumbs up. It really does help a lot. Thanks a lot for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.